Well, hey there, you're on the internet. My life's kind of crazy right now, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie nib nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at an ink today, shall we? Now, today's ink is by the infamous brand of Akkerman, and this one I actually have in a bottle. And it's number 11, and honestly, I don't know how to pronounce those little triangle things, so I've just always called it Treves-Turquoise, or just turquoise, because it's their turquoise. I got this bottle at the San Francisco Pen Show in 2015, and I have 5 actual bottles now. I have 2 or 3 smaller bottles that somebody siphoned out for me. This is my least favorite so far. Yeah, I mean, it's we'll get into that, but honestly, it's one of the ones I wish I had bought a sample of first. I thought, hey, turquoise, great, right? It's not awesome. We'll get into it, but yeah, the 2 pens I used were these. They're both Preppies. Now, this is your standard number 5. So the medium size. Now, these pens generally, across the board, mine have always been quite dry, which makes sense if you think about how they're constructed. And this one was, or is. Now, the nice thing about Preppies is because of this very thin metal that makes up the nib, it's very easy to cut through with pliers and very easy to smooth. So I have turned a bunch of mine into stubs, and because the metal is so thin, because like, can you see that? See how thin that metal is? It can give you a very extreme line contrast, and rather wonderfully, I think just because the metal ends up so close to the feed, a lot of times my stubs have ended up being pretty wet. So I thought this would be a nice contrast. Standard, sort of slightly dry medium, and one of my made stubs, which was actually a little wet. And also, kind of, this Esterbrook, it doesn't have the ink in it anymore, but it has a 9314 fine relief nib, although really just sort of writes more like a medium because I think whoever used it didn't use it very well. And it was in there for about 10 days, and it dried out a little, and so that made an appearance on several of the tests. Now, this is a turquoise, and it seems like every brand has a turquoise, even brands that don't have many colors, and a lot of them are very similar. So I actually had, let me double check my notes. Yeah, I had 19 similar samples that I narrowed down. So, yeah, here's Akkerman number 11, turquoise, and Diamine aqua blue. Now, as you might be able to tell from this, it's kind of thin. I know I'm going to piss off people through this whole video, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Maybe I got a bum bottle, but mine was really thin. So yeah, as you can see, even this, the aqua blue from Diamine, it's even in the lighter parts, it's still denser than that. So yeah, but anyways, here's Private Reserve's Daphne blue, which again, very similar. I mean, seems like every turquoise is practically the same, but this one is thinner. Schaefer turquoise. Again, very similar, but even in the thin areas, like where it's absolutely thinnest, like I was using the paint mixing knife, it's still, there's more there. And lastly, Diamine Bow Blue, which is pretty much the epitome of the kind of inks that I hate that are so super undersaturated. The thing is, the densest parts here are kind of similar to the light medium bits here. So yeah, there's that. Yep. Alright. Let's check out the chromatography. Now here's the chromatography as it is meant to be done. You can vaguely make out the initial drop line where it was, and you can vaguely make out some stuff for maybe the first 1/4 of an inch. And then, I mean, it's not water resistant, it's just not. And then I let it dry, which is something I do for my own amusement. And interestingly, you get this little hint of purple. But yeah, then still pretty much the same. It's just it's not as dark up at the top. So, yep. And then I wanted to see what this ink could stand up against, and the answer is pretty much nothing. The water, spoiler alert, made it look like it was never there. The bleach really broke it up. The thing is, this is from the bottom of the stack, so it started to, like, you can't really tell, it started to, like, eat through the paper. Ammonia pen flesh really got it moving, but again, that's started to mess with the paper. It has, yeah. Then hydrogen peroxide again started to eat the paper, so I kind of sopped it up as soon as I put it down because it started to freak out. But yeah, again, a reminder: water-soluble inks are very easy to clean out of your pens, which is nice because preppies are annoying in that you can't remove the feed. I really wish they would change that. But anyways, paper test. Top down to density, Clairefontaine, 90 grams per square meter. I'll try and hold this still so you can get a look, but man, am I caffeinated right now. Yeah, I love quadrilateral paper. I have the worst handwriting in the world. I will start writing like this if I don't have guidelines. And since dots are dots, often it's not enough of a guide for me. So I love quadrilateral paper, or graph paper, as it's sometimes called. The thing is, when you can see what these lines that are supposed to be able to fade into the background through the densest part of an ink, that's not great. Yeah, but man, you can see what I mean by the stubs getting pretty wet, because look at that. Yeah, and there's a nice halo effect around the wettest parts. I'll try and get my finger out of the way. So you do get a lot of contrast, a lot of shading, which is something that's very common in undersaturated inks because, yeah, yeah, so you get a nice halo effect around the wettest parts, like you can see in the bottom of the G in boxing. The thing is that medium often doesn't lay down enough ink on its own to give much of a halo. But yeah, it's very well behaved, you know, no bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo. I mean, I feel like this could be sheen if you laid it down more, these halos, but not much. But then when we look at what happened with this Esterbrook after 10 days, see how dark that gets? So I actually really love this ink when it's evaporated. So essentially once it's been condensed, because here it gets dark and rich, and you do get a tiny bit of a halo sheen around the wettest part, so that's nice. But yeah, there is zero water resistance. There's absolutely none. Just none. So yeah, easy to clean out of your pens. Now next up is Fabriano Echo Quads, 85 grams per square meter. It's fantastic. This is quickly becoming my preferred paper. I'd say it already is my preferred paper, but it looks really good on here. Yeah, you get great shading because there aren't the quadrilateral lines anymore. It's less obvious. However, when I bring this in, look at the bottom scrubby, you can still see the dots, which I do not like. But anyways, the standard medium preppy took 8 seconds to dry. Generally, for nice papers, I'd say it dries a little faster than average. Yeah, but I mean, considering it's mostly water. Anyways, the stub took 23. You do get a very nice halo effect around the wettest parts, and here it does turn into sheen, those halos. And I just want to point out again how good this looks in the evaporated Esterbrook. I mean, there you can probably see the sheen. Yep, in that little scrubby. So that's nice. We don't really get any here, but, you know, like here we do. But again, it's like razor thin, so it's hard to see. But again, because the ink is so undersaturated, you get a great contrast. So if you love shading, that could really work for you. I mean, it's very obvious here in halo. and you even get the halo. But yeah, again, no bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo, no water resistance. The littlest bit that we get is from that stub when I did the downstrokes. And just like here with the downstrokes, all the ink sort of sat at the bottom. So that's why that remained. And then the dots. But yeah, so. Next up is Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter. So the medium took 7 seconds to dry. The stub took 17. And again, we get a very distinct halo effect around the wettest parts. Not so much in the scrubby, but again, very distinct shading, but again, it's so light. It's so undersaturated, which is why I really like it in this Esterbrook, where again, we get a little bit of a halo sheen around that little scrubby. Looks great there, but yeah, I mean, you can still see all the dots. That is not to my preference. That is one of the reasons why I personally do not like this ink for myself and my own uses. It could be perfect for you, and that's great. This is not to my taste. But yeah, this paper I think was from approaching the bottom of the block, which can sometimes lead to behavioral problems. There's like a few spots where you get a hint of something, and then with the Esterbrook, so, I don't know. Maybe it gets aggressive as it dries out. But yeah, this water test, it's really gone. It's really, really gone. Now, next up is Tomoe River paper, which is known for drawing out shading and sheen and dry times and echo. And it kind of did draw out the dry times, but really not as much as I was expecting. So that medium took 13 seconds, the stub took 26. Again, we get a very distinct halo effect around the wettest parts. And honestly, I was expecting more sheen, because like, if you look at that scrubby, you can see that like, you'd think that's where it would sheen, but it doesn't really. It doesn't shine, it just got dark. But you do kind of get these razor thin, like almost microscopic thin, sheeny bits around the halos in the writing with the stub. So if you like shading, you're definitely going to see it here. The thing is, you're not going to see it as much as you might on other papers because the ink takes longer to dry, and so it gives the ink time to pool across the letter that you've written. So yeah, but as I say here, halos everywhere. They're just everywhere. There's halos around everything. It's like somebody went around the writing with like a fine liner and just outlined it. But because this ink is so light, it doesn't really echo, except here in the scrubby where I just kept laying it on and laying it on and laying it on, waiting for it to show me some sheen, but it didn't. The Esterbrook, however, is just, you know, has an outline of sheen for days, so that's nice. But yeah, no bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo because it's so light, no water resistance whatsoever. And again, the faintest hints that we can see, those are all from the stub. So yeah. Now, to be fair, on the next 3 tests, I just used the, come on camera, I just used the standard medium, except to write the name. So here is the world's worst 20-pound copier paper. This stuff is just awful. And, yeah, we got some spread. You could say, there's the regular right here, these lines, and here it is on the copier paper. It exploded. It got really, really broad, and you lose shading, but because of that, like because of the shading, it made certain areas dark on the fancier papers. Here, it just remains very light, and somehow it even stays looking undersaturated, which is unfortunate. It took 3 seconds to dry because this is very absorbent paper. The Esterbrook looks lovely, but still there's spread and yeah, I was not expecting these results. Again, you know, I mean, preppies, because of like the way they, you know, the tines, they generally are fairly dry writing, so I was not expecting this. I mean, we got dots everywhere, and a lot of show through, and amusingly enough, this right here is the stub. There's like It's like a third as many dots, so that was weird. But yeah, I thought there'd be more feathering, and there is some. Mostly though, it's just a wooliness and a lot of spread. So yeah, I'm not really seeing much or any feathers, which was interesting. But yeah, more absorbent papers tend to draw the ink in and make it harder to wash out. The thing is, since this ink is mostly water anyway, you know, yeah, I'm just going to let you look at that, and you can name those results whatever you want, because I don't know how to describe that. Now, next up is Mead Notebook Paper. Very common for school children in the United States. This is the kind of stuff you'd find in like a spiral notebook, rather than the stuff you'd find in a lab notebook. That stuff is more of a newsprinty texture. Lately, this stuff has been feathering a lot, so that is something that this paper tends to do. However, as you can probably tell, there is not nearly as much spread. The line width didn't increase as much. And while there are feathers, come on, camera, it's mostly a wooliness. It's like a distinct wooliness, but also you can see we've got a little bit of shading here. Just a little bit. Maybe not entirely flattering, but yeah, it still manages to look thin and undersaturated. It took 2 seconds to dry. The Esterbrook looks lovely. But there's no bleed, which is nice. You do get like a little hint of something, especially here in the scrubby, but that's the scrubby. And then even the Esterbrook didn't come through. You can just sort of see it because this paper's so thin. But yeah, this paper does tend to freak out sometimes when you add water, and it kind of did. But, so it feathered, it exploded. Camera, calm down. There we go. And it's hard to read. It's very, very hard to read, so that would not be fun to try and recover. Now, lastly is Moleskine notebook paper, which I have decided is now my sworn nemesis, so I hate this stuff. It's terrible. It is. It's very cheaply made. It's poorly made paper for raw ink use. So, yeah. You can see the pulp texture, if my camera will ever focus. You can see like the texture of the pulp that they used to make the paper, which is not good. It took 4 seconds to dry. We get a very intense wooliness. I guess we do kind of get shading, but it's really not flattering. I mean, the Esterbrook made it freak out even more, but still. And here's the problem. It bled all over and rendered onto the page below. And again, we see this a lot. It's like a million teeny tiny dots, which is obnoxious, but and it's everywhere. So it's again, this is a preppy. You know, they're dry writing. I hate this stuff. Now, talk about freaking out when you add water. What would you even call that? I honestly, like, the only reason why I know where what was because I wrote it. But, good God, man. Anyways, yeah, there you go. There's Akkerman number 11, Treves-Turquoise. So far, it is the only Akkerman I regret. But again, that's a personal preference. I like my inks more saturated. But if you love contrast, you know, if you want like extreme shading and you like halos and stuff, go for it. Not on cheap paper. Yep. I love it when it's evaporated and it looks beautiful there. But yeah, anyways, for your consideration from the Triple N Network, if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching. Bye.